Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of T-Dog RC. I'm Tim and I'm very excited because in this episode we are taking a look at this, which I have finally, after all these years of being into RC, fixed wing RC, I've finally got my hands on a turbine engine. This is a real gas turbine engine for those of you who are not into the hobby and you want to know exactly what this is. So this is basically a real jet engine that runs on real jet fuel, and it's absolutely tiny. It's an incredible piece of engineering, and in this video we're going to get it unboxed. We're going to have a look at all the components that we get with it. We're going to get it mounted on our test stand and we're going to give it its first ever run. If you are into fixed wing RC, then why not subscribe to my channel? It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe and I'd love to have you on board as a subscriber. And if you do enjoy this video, then give me a thumbs up because that helps me out on YouTube as well. Right, that's enough waffle. Let's get this on the bench. Let's have a look what we've got and let's get stuck in. Okay, so it's finally happened. As I said on the intro there, I've finally, after all these years of being into RC planes, I have got my hands on a turbojet. This is a real engine, real jet engine that uses real jet fuel, kerosene fuel. Just amazing to actually have one as well on in the workshop. So really looking forward to getting into this. If you do follow along to the channel, you might have already seen part one of what I'm actually putting this engine in. So I'm doing a build series on free wing Avanti. I'm actually going to put this in a foam model, so trying to do the model on a bit of a budget. Obviously the engine is very expensive, but if you're interested in that, then I shall put a link up now in the top right hand corner and you can have a look at that. But this video, as I said, is going to be all about getting this unboxed, getting it on the test stand, getting it plumbed up, connected to the fuel tank, and then of course giving it its first test run. So let's have a look what we've got in the box. So first things first is we get a quick start guide. It tells you some pretty basic stuff here, but what sort of battery to use that they recommend, what sort of fuel you need to use, what sort of oil you need to use, which is crucial because you have to mix turbine oil in with the fuel, because the way these engines work, there's no separate oil tank or anything like that, like there would be on the real thing. The oil is actually in the fuel, a bit like a two-stroke engine. Then you have to set up your transmitter with the ECU that's built into this, so it recognises the throttle control and all that sort of stuff. And then it tells you how to plumb the engine up with the fuel tube and that kind of thing. There is a much bigger PDF guide which you can download, and I would highly recommend, if you do buy one of these engines, that you download that guide and read through it from start to finish, because there's quite a few things in there that are pretty important to know, so don't just rely on that quick start guide. So let's have a look what we've got. So first things first, we've got all the connections for the engine. So as you can see, this is brand new, everything's sealed up. I've not opened this yet. I have opened the box, but I've not opened any of these packages up. So in here we've got some XT30 connections, and then we've got an XT60 there, which is going to be for the main battery, I guess. And then you've got the connection there for the engine itself, and then there's some servo type connectors here, which are going to go between your receiver and the ECU. So you get some fuel tubing in this included, which I think is 4mm tubing. A little inline fuel filter, which is very important to use these because you don't want any contaminants or bits of dust or anything like that from the fuel going into the going into the fuel pump for a start, or of course definitely not going into the engine. So according to the instructions, this needs connecting between the tank and the fuel pump, so it filters the fuel before it gets into the pump. So very important that we use that. And then here is the little fuel pump. Nice tiny little thing, a couple of mounting points there for this. and then you've got an inlet and an outlet. So inlet is going to suck the fuel out of the tank, and then the outlet's going to push it into the turbine. So this is going to go, this is kind of the ECU, if you like, for the engines. This is the brain of the engines. This goes inside the model. I've chosen to do two versions of this engine. I've gone for the light version, which means it just has this small circuitry inside the engine, and there isn't like a permanent display. Some engines have a bigger display which you keep inside the engine, but this one's the light sort of compact unit. I think it's called light anyway. And then we've got the actual display itself, which is a little LCD screen, and that's what we use to actually program the engine and monitor the engine. And then before you fly, well, it's up to you really, but generally speaking, before you fly, you would unplug this and leave this out. And then we've got the engine itself. Now, you won't believe how small this is. We just move this box out of the way. It's a tiny, tiny thing. It's crazy how small it is. It's about the size of as a fizzy drinks can. Let's get this open. So this is brand new sealed engine. Let's get this open since we're doing a bit of an unboxing. And there it is. Look at that. You can probably see, maybe if I get my torch out here and just shine a bit of light on that, you can actually see the exhaust turbine in the back there, and then of course at the front, which is a little difficult to see because you've got this protective screen on, but I think I can take this off. You can see the compressor there in the front, and then this is a little brushless motor which is going to spin the compressor around to get it started, and then that disengages once the engine's running. Yeah, just incredible bit of engineering. Tiny little thing. You've got your fuel input there, so they've just put a piece of pipe here which is crimped off just to again stop anything from going in there that you don't want. Engine mounts here, so it's quite simple to mount really, just literally screws in with these two metal ears, and then that's just a single connection to connect all the ECU and everything. And if you give it a sniff, which obviously you can't on camera, but you can smell a bit of oil and sort of kerosene, because they usually do test run these things in the factory to make sure. Obviously one of the key things they've got to make sure is that it's all balanced, and you can see in there, let me get the torch again, you can see there where there's like a mark on the turbine wheel there, and that's where they've obviously ground some of the material away there to get it all perfectly balanced. What a cool little thing that is. Right, so let me read out some interesting specs for you about this engine, because it's really quite impressive. So it's as you saw, it's a Xicoy engine. I think that's the wrong pronunciation. I watched the video literally the other day. It's a Spanish company, so I think they pronounce that differently over there. So apologies if we're pronouncing that wrong, but that's kind of how we would say it over here. And this is what's called this is the smallest engine that they do, and it's called a 45, and that's based on the amount of thrust it produces, and this can produce up to 45 Newton meters of thrust, which equates to approximately 4.5 kilos of thrust, or around about 10 pounds of thrust at full throttle. And running at full throttle, absolutely crazy, this thing is going to be spinning at 225,000 RPM, just absolutely nuts. And the minimum RPM is going to be around 60,000, so really moving at speed. Exhaust gas temperature is going to be anywhere between 500 and 700 degrees C, so you don't want to be putting your hand at the back when it's running, because it's going to be damn hot. Runs on a 2S LiPo, and one of the other cool facts that I really like about this, although it's quite alarming at the same time, is it does give you a warning about using this in a confined space. So it actually says you have to be very careful where you run this. If you were to run it indoors, for example, you could actually end up sucking all of the air out of the room, because unbelievably, it gives you a bit of a equation here. But for every kilograms of thrust, every second, the engine consumes a volume of air about 20 litres. That's for every kilograms of thrust. So at full thrust for this particular engine, it's 4.5 kilos. That equals, they've just literally put here in the description, it basically is the equivalent of a dustbin full of air every second that this engine is going to be consuming. So absolutely mad for just a little thing like this. So yeah, if you use it indoors, you might find that you run out of air pretty quickly. And also, if you put it in a model and you haven't got the right air intakes on the model, it will basically make your model implode. It will just suck it to pieces from the inside, because if you haven't got the right amount of air being able to flow through the model, it's not going to be a good thing. So absolutely crazy, but really nice little thing, and I absolutely can't wait to get this started and fired up. So next thing is let me show you how I'm going to get this mounted and all the plumbing, and we'll get it all set up on the bench, and I'll go through everything and how it's all connected, and obviously to do its first run I'm going to do that outside. Right then, so this is what I've rigged up for my test stand, and if you are an experienced turbine person, you probably want to look away now maybe, but I've just used some 18mm ply that I had knocking around that I actually used for some shelving, and that's worked perfectly. So I've got this, the actual engine just sat between these two pieces which I've screwed in from underneath. I've just got to screw this down, so I've just put some screws through there just to secure that in place. Then I've mounted the little fuel pump on here, because that actually screws in from the bottom. So I had to sort of put that on a plate and then mount that to the board. And then we've got the bubble trap here. I've got my filler pipe there. So just tuck that in there for now. And then that's obviously going into here, which is the main tank. I've just blocked off one of the tubes there, and I'll leave that in place for when it's in the model as well. So that's sealed that up. And then this other one here, at the moment I've not got anything on it, but when it's in the model, that pipe there is actually going to be a vent pipe, and that'll just sort of go down to the bottom somewhere. But for now I've just left it off because I'm not going to fill the tank right up to do the test run. Then we've got a fuel filter. It says in the instructions to put the filter in front of the pump, because you want to try and minimise the amount of debris that's potentially going to get into the pump. With it being a particular small one, it could easily get blocked up. So we've got filter going in, and then the fuel's going to come out. I've got a fuel valve here, and I've actually used the 3D printed valve holder which you get in the Castle conversion kit. So they include a few 3D printed parts like this, and it's a perfect fit for one of these Festo valves, so that's perfect. So that's on and that's off, and it's good practice apparently, and I can understand why as well, to have a valve, because when you fill this up, if you don't have a valve, if any fuel gets into the engine, like sort of makes its way into the engine, that can cause a problem, because you can get a hot start, as they call it, where you've got the fuel build-up in there. Whereas if you have the valve closed while you're actually running the pump to fill the tank, it's not going to be a problem. So obviously I'll have that in the model as well. And then we've just got all the electronics down here. So you've got the main, there's only one lead that goes to the engine, and then you've got a little servo lead going to the ECU, which just powers the pump, and then you've got your this is actually a touch screen to control it. And I've had the other thing I've done is I've got this all set up with my radio, so I've my this has learned my receiver for the throttle control, basically, because you have to calibrate the throttle to your radio setup. So I've done all that. I've checked the startup parameters on this, made sure, for example, it's set to things like kerosene and not diesel, because I'm using kerosene. I've checked the glow plug voltage, because I've seen a couple of people say from the factory it used to be set quite low, and that caused problems with starting, but I've checked this one and they must have changed that, because it was set to higher than some examples I've seen. So it's all good to go. The only thing I've got to do is connect my battery, which I've bought a 4max, and these are good quality batteries. That's a 2200 2S LiPo, so that's going to be plenty to power this. And then I just need to hook my receiver up to it, and then we can take it outside and start the thing up for the first time and give it a test. And then in terms of the fuel, I've mentioned that I'm going to use kerosene, so I've bought, I think I bought 4 litres of kerosene, and then I've bought this Deluxe Materials Power Model jet oil, and this is actually recommended in the manual. There's all sorts of oils that you can use. It has to be aviation grade oil, and I'm guessing would be fairly hard to get hold of some of the stuff that you can use, but this of course is available in most model shops, and apparently this is really good stuff. So you mix 4% of this with your kerosene, so I've got to get that done first, get that all pre-mixed, and then once I've pre-mixed it, I will then filter it and pump it into my tank, and then we'll be ready to go. So yeah, next clip I'm going to be outside, and we'll hopefully do a run up.
Right then guys, here we are outside on the bench. I've got the tank filled up, as you can see, and you can see I've got the oil mixed in there already. One thing I didn't mention on the previous clip was the one last thing I had to do was prime the pump. So that's just an option that you get on the menu. So prime the pump and manage to stop it. I don't know if you can even see that, you probably can't really pick it up on the camera, but as per the instructions, I've managed to stop it just before it goes into the engine. So that should be perfect and ready to run. So all I've got to do now is get my transmitter, get the batteries, and we'll start it up. Oh yeah, and I've also got my fire extinguisher at the ready. Okay guys, here we go. Stabilise for a minute and then we'll throttle up. Okay, well, I think we'll call that a success. Really pleased with that, ran really well, throttles up really quickly. You couldn't see on the camera, but there's a bush just behind here and it was blowing that like crazy, so certainly going to have a lot of power in the foam Avanti. It's going to be mental. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed watching that as much as I have, and if you want to support the channel then please hit the subscribe button, and if you want to see me put this in a model and fly it, which I will be doing as part of my Turbine series, then you definitely want to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And thanks to everyone that's already subscribed, I really appreciate it, and if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up because that helps me out as well. Alright, I'll see you soon for the next one.